Good afternoon. I'm Heather Hughes, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us today for Public Entity Partners Partnering for Success webinar series. Today, we will be discussing the Bureau of Workers' Compensation Reward Program. Before I get to today's webinar, I wanted to invite each of you to join us for our member workshops, which will be transitioning to a virtual program this year. We will be covering risk management basics as well as understanding the renewal application and coverages. Once we have the final details on that virtual program, you will be able to register for the workshops via our website at www.pepartnersplural.org. Our presenter today is Jeff Francis. He is the Assistant Administrator for the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. He's a native of Middle Tennessee, and Jeff received his BWC degree in marketing from Austin Peay and his master's degree in labor studies from the University of Massachusetts. He also graduated from the Tennessee Government Executive Institute and LEAD TN. He is former president of the Tennessee Labor Management Foundation as well. As a program coordinator for the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development, he developed and managed the Medical Impairment Rating Registry. Now the Assistant Administrator of the Tennessee Bureau of Workers' Compensation, his responsibilities include assisting with budgeting, human resources, and information systems, and supervising the claims, coverage, and communications aspects for the Bureau. And now to teach us more about the reward program, please welcome Jeff Francis.
Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Francis. I'm the Assistant Administrator of the Bureau of Workers' Compensation, just like she said, and I greatly appreciate the invitation to come out and spend a couple of hours with y'all. No, I'm joking. It's not going to be a couple of hours. It'll just seem like a couple of hours. It'll only be less than an hour. It'll be less than an hour. And without any further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen so I can show you the slides on this reward program. So hold on one second, please. Heather, can you confirm that you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Excellent. We're going to get started. Again, my name is Jeff Francis, and I'm here to explain to you about this new program that we unveiled in the Bureau of Workers' Compensation slightly over a year ago, I guess. It's the reward program. Start off with a quick question. What's the purpose of workers' compensation? Workers' compensation was introduced in Tennessee in 1919, so it's a little over 100 years old. What's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of it now? What was the purpose of it 100 years ago? And is it the same purpose now as it was 100 years ago? We believe now that the purpose of workers' comp is to help injured employees return to their health so that they can return to their job. And we should be doing that as quickly as possible. No matter what your role in the system is, whether you're the employer, the adjuster, one of the medical providers, if you're the injured employee himself, we believe that everybody should have that same goal of trying to get that injured worker back to their health and back to their job as quickly as possible. Nowhere in there does it say make them rich along the way. We shouldn't try to make them better necessarily than they were when they got injured, but we don't want to leave them in a worse state either. Because if we're able to do that, if we're able to accomplish that simple goal of helping somebody get back to their health and back to their job as quickly as possible, then it will minimize those negative consequences, such as lawsuits. Lawsuits are often unnecessary and they drive up costs to the system. A lot of times they complicate the system, they drag it out. And because it drags out, a lot of times the outcome for that injured worker can be worse. And that's not the goal. But I will ask, if the goals are that simple, to help somebody that gets injured at work to return to their health so that they can return to their job as quickly as possible, then why in the world is it called workers' compensation? Why was it called workers' compensation 100 years ago? Tennessee wasn't the first state to pass workers' comp. Wisconsin was. But we're not the last state to have done it either. Like so many other things, we can say thank God for Mississippi. But why in the world is it called workers' comp or workers' compensation if the goals are to help somebody get back to work? Because when I utter those two words, workers' compensation, when I speak those two words, what do you think rings in most people's ears? When I utter the words workers' comp, what word rings in their ears? I guarantee you it's compensation. Because that sounds like money. And if I got hurt at work, I want that. I'm expecting some money because that's what you just promised me. It's called workers' compensation. So compensate me. I'm due some compensation. So I wish it had never been called that. It should have never been called that 100 years ago. Imagine if for the past 100 years, instead of workers' compensation, it had been known as workers' recovery, because that seems to be what the goals better indicate. Imagine if we worked in a system called workers' recovery rather than workers' comp. So we're trying to remodel, we're trying to remake the current system into one that's more based on a workers' recovery rather than their compensation. We want them to focus on their own recovery rather than their compensation. And that's why we introduced the reward program. If you'll notice, the reward program, the word reward is an acronym. And the initials stand for return employees to work and reduce disabilities. That's the goal of this program, is to assist employers in returning their injured workers back to work quicker than they normally would have, quicker than they have been in the past. And for some employers and for some providers, for some injured employees, just for some stakeholders in general, that's going to require a mind shift, a paradigm shift. What is a paradigm shift? Well, it's not a paradigm shifting. That's my feeble attempt at humor this afternoon. That's not what a paradigm shift is. A paradigm shift is a change in the way that you view the world. It's a change in the way that people see things, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the stakeholders to look at this in a different way. Not one based on compensation, but one based on recovery. And I'm going to say something now that some people might find frightening, and that is work is good for us. Work is good for us. Now, it may not be as good for us as fishing is, or golfing, or shopping, or taking a nap, but work is good for us. Often it defines who we are. When you meet somebody new, probably one of the first things that you ask them is, what do you do for a living? A lot of times it helps determine who we are and how we think about ourselves. And studies will show that somebody that is not working is far more likely to suffer from depression than somebody who is working. It allows us to connect socially, or it used to. Before the pandemic, it allowed us to connect socially. But for this pandemic, we would probably be meeting face-to-face in a room somewhere right now. But we're not, but we're still connecting. We're just doing it in a different manner. So work is good for us. For some of us, it gives us a purpose. It gives us a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It allows us to set goals and to accomplish goals. It obviously provides security. It probably allows us to put food on the table, a roof over our head, clothes on our back. But studies will also show you that it allows us to live longer. People who work live longer than those who don't. And that's because working is good for us. When somebody is injured at work, everybody loses. Everybody loses. And Heather, I apologize. One thing that I forgot to say when I started this was that I want this presentation to be informal, which means that if you have a question while I'm making my presentation, feel free to either unmute yourself and just ask it out loud. I don't mind that at all. I encourage that. I welcome that. But if you're more comfortable or don't have a microphone, enter your question or your comment in the chat feature. I want to answer any question anybody might have. So please feel free to unmute and interrupt, or to simply type in a question or a comment in the chat feature. Back to the slides. When somebody is injured at work, everybody loses. We know how much the employee loses. They're going to lose some of their wages. In Tennessee, there's a 7-day waiting period. So if they get injured and only miss 3 or 4 days, they're not going to get, or not likely to get, paid for those days. Even if they're out for an extended time, they don't draw 100% of their wages. And it's true that their work comp benefits are not taxed, but they still don't equal 100% of their average weekly wage. People that get injured at work often fear that they're going to lose their job. It causes some people to not even report their injury because they're afraid they'll get fired if they do. Some not only fear what might happen to their health after their workplace injury, but some of them are actually injured and left with a permanent impairment. Unfortunately, some lose their lives. And sometimes those injuries, especially the more severe ones, deal with their self-esteem and their personal worth. And it can impact their family life, especially if they lose their job or lose a significant portion of their income, and it impacts their standard of living. But employers also lose. You lose the productivity that injured worker provided, whatever number of widgets they built or services they provided to the public. You probably have to pay somebody overtime or allow orders to just back up while you're waiting for somebody. You might hire a temporary worker to come in that's going to have a learning curve that's not going to be as productive as that full-time employee was. There's the obvious cost, the claim cost, but there's also administrative costs for handling that claim. So everyone loses when somebody gets injured at work. So what is this reward program that I talked about? It's an attempt to bring all of the stakeholders, all of the parties involved in a claim together to work toward those two goals of helping that injured worker get back to their health and back to their job. That's what the reward program is. It's trying to tie in the full circle, beginning with top management, bringing in the adjusters, the return to work coordinator, which I'll explain again in a moment. That's an employer representative at the work site. The medical providers that are assisting in this claim, the employees themselves and their family, and the supervisors, because the supervisors are going to play a big part in the success of this program. And like Claire Musselman, who works for the North American Risk Services, former adjuster, said, when the collective group works as a team, great things can happen. That's what we want to accomplish with the reward program, is great things on a small scale, small meaning individual scale, on that one particular injured worker's scale. So what does this new program include? First is a toolkit, and I'll introduce you to the toolkit in a moment and show you where to find it. Training, not only for those employer representatives, but also for physicians. Those physicians that we hope you're putting on your panels, the ones that are providing the medical treatment to the injured workers as they recover. And there's also a support network, because we believe that there's value in each other's experiences, their life experiences, their successes, their failures. So we want like-minded employers to network so that they can share their thoughts and experiences. So let's go back to that toolkit that I just mentioned, one of the first components of the reward program. It's available on our website. If you go to our website, and our website is tn.gov/workerscomp, no apostrophe, just tn.gov/workerscomp. Right across the top banner of our homepage is the toolkit, because it's that important to us. So what's in this toolkit? Advice for employers on actions they can take and should take even before an injury occurs, as well as afterwards, but don't wait until somebody gets injured at work to begin this work. We're going to define that return to work coordinator role because we believe it's helpful and important for each employer to designate somebody that receives the training on what should be done when somebody gets injured at work. Here at the Bureau of Workers' Compensation, we only get involved in a claim when there's some type of a dispute. On any given year, there are between 90 and 100,000 injuries at work. There are between 90 and 100,000 first reports of injury filed with us on any given 12-month period. On the overwhelming majority of those 100,000 or 90,000, we're not involved. They get injured at work, they get the treatment they need, they get well, and they go back to work. We're not involved. It's reported to us, but we don't have involvement. We get involved when there's some type of a dispute. And a lot of times this dispute is because employers don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know what their rights, what their responsibilities are. Sometimes they mishandle the claim. So we want to train somebody at each work site on what their rights and responsibilities are. We call that person a return to work coordinator. So our toolkit has advice for the return to work coordinator. There's a couple of calculators in there, not physical calculators, but online calculators where you can determine whether or not this program is going to save you money or not. We believe it will. We explain the role of a case manager and the important function of a case manager and when they're appropriate and when they might be helpful and when they're not necessarily needed. And we also have advice on how to choose the right physician. Choosing a physician to place on a panel that you provide to a worker when they report their injury is a benefit that employers in this state have fought for. They have petitioned the legislature to have that right to restrict the medical care for that injured worker to only these doctors that I make available to the injured worker. And the number one complaint that we get from injured workers is, my employer won't give me a panel. It's a right that they have fought for, but they don't exercise. They don't take advantage of that right. And I'm not sure if you realize this or not, but right now I'm sitting in the town of Nashville, so 50 miles to the north in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. If an injured worker needs medical care in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky today, do you know what doctor they go to? Whatever doctor they choose. Employers don't have that right in Kentucky to restrict the care. That's a right that they have in this state, and we want to help them make good selections on which physicians to place on a panel. So the toolkit has some advice on there on how to select those physicians. If you're interested in going to the toolkit right now, there's a QR code. If you have your telephone handy, you can take out your smartphone and aim your camera at the screen on that QR code, and it'll take you directly to the toolkit. You can also find it, a link to it, from the top of our webpage. Again, tn.gov/workerscomp. tn.gov/workerscomp. Let's go back to selecting that right physician. How do you know who the right physician is? Obviously, it should be somebody that's willing to take workers' comp. Not every physician in this state takes workers' comp patients. So before you put somebody on a panel, you need to verify that they're willing to accept workers' compensation payments. And then what you can expect out of that doctor is that they assist you in recovering this injured worker, which means that they have to do some teaching to the injured worker so that they can participate in their own recovery. And what we're calling foreshadowing, which is asking them to accomplish tasks between visits. If I see an injured worker today as the treating physician and I schedule a follow-up appointment in 2 weeks, then I would want that physician to say to that injured worker, between now and the next 2 weeks, I want you to work on improving your range of motion in your shoulder if you're complaining of a shoulder injury, so that when you come back in 2 weeks, your range of motion will have improved. Or I'm going to put a restriction on you right now where you can't lift over 10 pounds, but between now and 2 weeks, I expect to be able to increase that to 15 pounds. You're going to be going to physical therapy in the next couple of weeks, and I want you to work with that therapist so that we can increase that restriction. We want the physicians to set standards and goals for the injured worker between visits that improve their recovery. I mentioned the case manager. There was a time not long ago, I can say not long ago because I'm 60 years old, and my not long ago and some of y'all's not long ago are probably two different measurements, but 25 or 30 years ago, there was a time when adjusters would go out into the field and they would visit injured workers, sometimes at their home, sometimes in the hospital, sometimes at the work site if they needed to. They would actually visit, meet face to face with the injured workers. They can't do that now. Not many of them do that now. A lot of times they have a case manager assigned to a claim that can do that and does do that. Sometimes the case managers go with the injured worker to the doctor appointment. They can be so helpful because they can be the eyes and the ears of the insurance adjuster and the employer and the liaison between the doctor and the employer, the doctor and the insurance adjuster. They can share messages. They can share documents. They can tell the physician what the employer allows when it comes to light duty. I see a question typed in. What if the employee doesn't do what the doctor tells them to do? For example, physical therapy. It depends on exactly what you mean by not doing what the doctor says. In order to be eligible for workers' compensation benefits, an injured worker has to comply with any reasonable request. If they don't comply with the reasonable request, you have the ability to terminate their benefits until they do comply. They don't have the right to say, no, I'm not going to go to that doctor. No, I'm not going to do what that doctor says. If they become non-compliant, you have the ability to terminate their benefits until they become compliant. You can't deny the claim, but you can terminate benefits until they become compliant. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please follow it up with another question. Does every injury need a case manager? No. It's usually the ones that are more complicated, that are more involved. They might have more body parts. They might have surgeries. They might have greater length of time off of work. So give strong consideration about when you need a case manager and when they might be able to provide some assistance. And then work with that case manager. Whether you're the employer or you're the adjuster, work with that case manager. Let them know what you can do, what you're willing to do to help them return to work as quickly as possible. For the employer, what are the best practices for an employer when somebody gets injured at work? First and foremost is accept that report of injury. If somebody comes to you and says, I got hurt at work, accept the report and notify your insurance adjuster. The rules require you to do that. You must accept the report. You don't have the right, you don't have the authority to say, I don't believe you got hurt here. Now, either go back to work or go home. I don't think you got hurt here. That will place you at risk of a penalty for not accepting the report of injury. But realize this, accepting a report of injury is not the same thing as saying it's a compensable claim. For the employers that are participating in this presentation, you assign that right of determining whether it's a compensable claim or not to your insurance adjuster. They have the responsibility of determining whether it's a compensable claim or not, because they're the ones that file everything with us. They file that first report with us, not you. They file whether it's a denied claim or not with us. They have that responsibility. They need your assistance a lot of times because they might need you to get in a written statement from the injured worker about what they were doing, when they were doing it, who witnessed what they were doing, where they were doing it. And they'll ask you for that written statement to assist them as part of their investigation. They're also going to interview the injured worker's authorized treating physician to get an opinion from the doctor. Is this work-related or not? But employers have 24 hours to report that notice of injury to their adjuster. And when you don't do it within 24 hours, you can hinder the recovery, slow down their ability to get medical treatment, because for them to get that medical treatment, they need you, the injured worker needs you, the employer, to give them that panel of doctors, that choice of physician form. It's called a C42. It's available on our website. This is the form that you should be using when you provide that panel of doctors to the injured workers. But employers should do more than simply provide that panel. They should start working with that doctor that's chosen to inform that doctor what that injured worker's job duties are. Sometimes an injured worker might exaggerate what they have to do. Man, I have to pick up 50 pounds 20 or 30 times a day, 5 days a week, and maybe they only pick it up once or twice a day or never. So work with that injured worker's doctor to make sure they're getting the accurate information so they can know whether or not they can return to work or not. And then work with that injured worker. Tell them, I'm here to help you. They're going to have questions. Many injured workers don't know what to expect, when to expect it, what they're entitled to receive, what benefits they might get, who's going to pay their benefits. They don't know. They're going to have questions. Anticipate questions. Welcome questions. And provide some answers in the form of this beginner's guide that's also available on our website. There's actually a requirement that employers provide injured workers a copy of this document, the beginner's guide, when they report their injury. There's a requirement to do that. I do an adjuster certification program where we train adjusters on Tennessee specifics, because no two states in the union have the same benefit structure, the same legal requirements, the same time frames. No two states are the same. So adjusters that handle multiple states have to try to keep up with multiple states' benefits. We want to make sure they're handling Tennessee claims right. So we train adjusters on Tennessee's requirements. One of the things that we train adjusters is, yeah, the employer is required to provide that form, but you as an adjuster, that might be some way that you can assist the employer by either reminding them of their requirements or mailing it out on their behalf. Just go ahead and mail it to the injured worker. It's just going to answer the basic questions that an injured worker is going to have. It'll give them our phone number in case they ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Because you know the other phone numbers that they get when they have questions? It's those lawyers that advertise on TV. The one that says you deserve to be paid for what you've gone through. Is that who you want them to call? Is that who you want them to go to for advice? Probably not. Have them come to you. Have them come to us. We're not going to represent them. We're just going to tell them what the law states. So feel free to use us as a resource, our phone number as a resource, our webpage as a resource. Feel free to give them that beginner's guide. Here's a news flash. Since this past October, that form that I just showed you, that choice of physician panel, has changed. This is now the current physician panel form. And that's because we now allow telehealth. That's another change that the pandemic has caused. Some people don't feel comfortable going to a doctor's office because there are a bunch of sick people sitting in a doctor's office waiting room. Sometimes it takes a week or two to see a doctor. But the telehealth might be an option today from the safety of my home, over my computer screen or my smartphone. So now our panel form has been modified to allow that. Whether or not telehealth is offered is an employer choice, not the employee. The employee cannot demand the ability to have telehealth as an option. The employer makes that choice. But the employer cannot demand that the employee accept telehealth. It's an option whether the employer wants to offer it. It's an option whether it is offered, whether the employee wants to take it or not. Whether you offer it or not, you have to have at least 3 physicians on the panel. The telehealth can be a 4th option. You can put walk-in clinics on the panel if you would like, but don't just put the name of the walk-in clinic. You need to find out who the supervising MD is at that walk-in clinic and put their name beside it. So if you put down the name of a walk-in clinic, an urgent care facility, find out who the treating MD, who the supervising MD is there, and put their name on the form as well. The law says it must be in the injured employees community. This panel of doctors should all reside, should all practice, have facilities in the injured employees community. What does that mean? I don't know. I can't tell you what that word means, community, because the law doesn't define it. But the law does say if you can't find 3 doctors in the community, you can go as far as 125 miles. So therefore, community has to be less than 125 miles. So try to make them as close to the injured worker as possible. It's important to remember that both parties have rights in a work comp claim. It's a no-fault system. No one has to prove it's somebody else's fault. Injured employees have a right to the benefits in the law. Employers have the right to restrict access to some of those benefits. You restrict access by providing a panel of doctors. Another responsibility of the employers is to let their workers know that they have work comp coverage. And you do that by posting this posting notice. The law says every employer must post this notice. And all that notice does is to tell the injured worker or tell the workers, if you get injured, here's who you notify. If you get hurt at work, here's who you need to tell. Do I tell my direct supervisor? Do I tell the HR manager? Do I tell the plant manager, the store manager? Tell me who to tell. If I work on the 3rd shift, do I tell the same person as people that work on the 1st shift? If I work in this building down the street, do I tell the same person as the people that work in the main office? Tell me. That's what this form tells the employees to do. This is who you notify. And the law says it must be posted in a conspicuous place. Put it on the break room wall, put it on near the time clock, somewhere where people will see it. It's on our website in both English and in Spanish. We want the injured workers return to work coordinator. We want the employer's return to work coordinator to change the focus on what a job restriction is. When the doctor writes a restriction, it usually says no lifting over 20 pounds, no bending and stooping, no standing on their feet for more than 5 hours or 4 hours or whatever. It says what they can't do. We want the return to work coordinator to look at that. Okay, you can't lift up to 20 pounds or over 20 pounds, but that means you can lift up to 20 pounds. You can't bend or twist and stoop. Okay, maybe you can sit at a desk. We want them to find those transitionary job duties that can be assigned to them. Those light duty jobs, not permanent, but for the 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it might take to allow this person to fully recover. So many employers have a policy that says we don't bring anybody back if they have restrictions. We won't bring anybody back if they're not at 100%. That's not in an employer's best interest. For the reasons that I've talked about earlier, the longer somebody stays off of work, the less likely they are to ever go back to work. When somebody is hurt at work and not allowed to work, I can tell you right now what they do. They sit in front of their computer, trolling the internet to find out how much money they're entitled to. That's not in your best interest. Find a job that they can do. A lot of employers, if they don't have a job that somebody can do on light duty, they will work with a nonprofit. They'll put them to work at some place like the Second Harvest Food Bank and let them work there during their recovery period. It helps the community, it helps the injured worker, it helps the employer. It's good. Working helps speed up recovery. We want to work with that treating physician about increasing their capacity between office visits. So we're going to train the return to work coordinator on what they need to do. But then we're going to take it another step farther. We're going to train physicians. Treating a work comp patient is different than treating somebody with the exact same injury that is using their private insurance. If I got injured at work today and had to have my knee replaced, and you got injured in the backyard today and had to have your knee replaced, chances are our recoveries are going to be completely different. There's a lot more paperwork involved on my claim. I'm probably going to have a case manager on my claim. I'm probably going to be saying, I don't want to go back to work. You're going to be saying, when can I go back to work? I want to go back to work. We have to train physicians on how to deal with work comp patients because often they go in with a different mindset. This return to work coordinator, we're not asking for employers to hire somebody. We believe it can be assigned to somebody who already works there. What are we going to train them in? The immediate needs of an injured worker. How to assemble that panel. Developing a relationship with the injured worker and the case manager and the treating physician. We have 6 or 7 different online training sessions. These are the topics that we've done in the past, and we're going to be repeating them again this year. Probably 2 or 3 times this year. They're all done online. They all last no more than 90 minutes. If you're interested, if you're an employer or if you're an adjuster and you're interested in participating in any of this training, Marion White is who you need to contact to register, to sign up for these trainings. They're all free. contact Marion White and let her know that you would like to be included in the next Return to Work Coordinator online training. And then, like I said, we believe that there's value in assembling like-minded people together, networking, sharing ideas, sharing successes. So we have an employer support group. They met virtually earlier this morning. They meet virtually every other month. And in the months between, there's a newsletter that goes out called the Reward Report. It's a free newsletter. It's an online newsletter emailed to employers that are in this program. We think you can grow from each other. Before this program can be successful, we have to overcome some misperceptions, some common misperceptions. A lot of times employers think, you want me to accommodate this person so they can come back to work sooner? That's expensive. No, it's not. Most accommodations are free. Just about all of them are less than $500. We're not asking for a huge investment to help somebody return to work. We believe that it will pay off far more than what you invest. That's why we have those calculators in the toolkit. We want to overcome that employer belief that if they have restrictions, I don't want them to come back to work. It's in your best interest to bring injured workers back to work as quickly as possible. We have to overcome some beliefs held by the injured worker that they're putting their life or their livelihood or their health at risk by going back to work before they're fully healed. Work is healing. Work extends our lives. Work is good for us. A lot of times employees just automatically believe, well, they don't have any kind of light duty. They're not going to accommodate my needs. We believe a lot of employers will accommodate them. Here are those two online calculators that I mentioned. They're included in the toolkit where you can plug in actual dollar figures on claims that you have administered and figure out, would this program have saved you money? Here's some large Tennessee employers that already have a return to work program that served as the basis for our program. Feel free to reach out to any of these employers and ask about their program, what they did to make it successful. So if you want to have a reward program, a return to work program, what should you do? Commit to having one. Draft a company policy that speaks to it. We have examples of company policies in the toolkit. And don't wait until somebody gets injured to start trying to find those light duty jobs. Go ahead and identify them before somebody gets injured. Once you determine that you're going to have such a program, tell your folks. Get the buy-in from your upper management. They're going to make the decision to begin with. But then get the buy-in from the supervisors and tell the folks on the shop room floor. I mentioned earlier that the supervisors are key. Here's why the supervisors are so key. They're often the face of the organization. They're also oftentimes going to be an obstacle because they're going to say, you mean I have to babysit this guy that can't do his full job? That's not the attitude you want. You have to show them why it's important that they work with that injured worker to help them come back to work even while they're recovering. And then designate somebody to be that return to work coordinator. Again, it doesn't have to be a new position. We're not asking you to expand your payroll, but find somebody that has a pleasing personality, that is a people type person that can work with people, that has gained their trust, and put them as the face of your return to work program. Unfortunately, sometimes people are just injured so badly they can't go back to work. Some people might have an amputation as a result of their injury or have some other type of catastrophic injury. What happens with them? Well, we have another program, a sister program called the Next Step program, where we will help retrain these people. We will pay their tuition to a technical school or to a university, a college or university, to retrain them in another industry. This is money that is available from the state to retrain somebody who can't return to their work because of their workplace injury. And they will also put them in contact with all the other state resources to help them return to work. This is a tight labor market. We want to help return as many people as possible back to work. We've got a lot of resources available to people to help them return to work. As I wrap up my presentation here, I'm just going to do a brief recap on the 8 steps that we want employers to do when somebody reports an injury. First of all, give them the panel of doctors. Y'all see this little ink pen here? It looks like an ink pen to y'all. It's not an ink pen. You know what that is? That's a magic wand. In my magic wand, when I wave my magic wand, you know what happens? Employers provide panels when somebody reports to them with an injury. They don't argue about, did you get hurt here? Prove to me you got hurt here. I don't think you got hurt here. They don't put them in the car and say, I'm going to take you to the clinic. They don't say, go wherever down the street you want to go. They give them a panel of doctors. That is the single most important thing that an employer can do to take control of the claim and to help that injured worker recover faster and return to their health and return to their job as quickly as possible. It's providing a panel of doctors. There's nothing more important to the claim than giving a panel of doctors. Second, expect questions. They're going to have questions. Give them that beginner's guide. It has our ombudsman phone number on there. Give them the beginner's guide. Have them give you a written statement, especially if you think they might be lying to you. That's going to be the first piece of evidence that adjuster wants to determine whether or not they're being truthful or not. Because if they give you one version of events today and they give the adjuster a different version of events when they talk to them, and they give the treating doctor a different version of events when they see the doctor, that's how you begin to assemble enough evidence to deny the claim. Have them give you a written statement, especially if you have reason to doubt them. If you've got a company form, an internal document on workplace injuries, fill that out too. Some employers do, some don't. Call your adjuster. You have to do it within 24 hours. That's what the law says. You have to do it within 24 hours. Start your investigation, whether you're the employer or the adjuster, either one. If you have doubts, start your investigation. But you notice that's not until after you've provided a panel, not until after you've given them the beginner's guide. It's not until after you already notified the adjuster. It's not the first thing that you do. Work to eliminate the possibility of somebody else getting injured the same way. If you've got an exposed wire and somebody got electrocuted, if you've got a puddle of water, somebody slipped in and fell and banged their head on the floor, mop it up. Tape it up, that exposed wire, whatever it is. Make sure somebody else doesn't get hurt. And then work with that injured employee to begin recovering. Remember, it's as quickly as possible. I don't live in a fairyland where I know that we can eliminate every workplace injury. People are going to get hurt at work. Thankfully, jobs are safer today than they ever have been. Thankfully, fewer people are getting hurt and catastrophically hurt than in years before, in our parents' and grandparents' time. But people still get hurt. And we need to work with them to help them return to their job and return to their health as quickly as possible. We are here to work with you. We are here as a resource for you. And then there are also other resources, such as those like-minded employers that might have more experience with a return to work program than you might have. And we can help put you in contact with them. We can put you in contact with the resources that we have. We want to be a resource for you. This is me. This is how you contact me. If you have questions today, tomorrow, next month, anytime in the future, feel free to call me, to email me, to reach out to me. Heather, again, I thank you. And there again is Marion White's contact information for those of you that might want to sit in on any or all of the Return to Work Coordinator online training sessions. I promise you I'll get it done in less than an hour. I've done it in less than an hour. If anybody wants to unmute and ask a question or type another question in the chat feature or anything else, I'll answer questions as long as they are. But with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Heather.
Well, and as I was telling Jeff earlier, I did go through the Return to Work Coordinator program, and it's very beneficial. It's a great program to go through, and if you have the time or can make the time to go through that program, it is a very beneficial program. I highly recommend it. We'll take questions if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask. Just as a housekeeping issue, we are recording this webinar and we'll be sending it out to you so that you can share this with other people in your departments. And in case you missed any sections of it, had to take a phone call or whatnot, but we will be recording this and sharing it with you. Jeff, is there any information you want to give them off the program or anything before we let everyone go?
Not that I can think of right now, but again, if anybody has any questions in the future, please feel free to reach out to me, or you can call the toll-free number on the Ombudsman list and ask them, and they can transfer you to anybody in the Bureau, anywhere in the state. So if you need to reach somebody in the Knoxville office or the Chattanooga office or Memphis office, you can call that same toll-free number and they'll transfer you to wherever you need to go.
Jeff, we thank you so much for presenting this information to our members today, and thank you for participating and for joining us today. If you do have questions, we'll be happy to get those to Jeff. You can send them to me here at PE Partners if you missed his email address or need further information. But we thank you for joining us, and we hope you all have a great afternoon.
Stay safe, everyone.